Hello, everybody. My name is Manan. Welcome again to my channel. Today, I have a special guest here, all the way from the US, Devyn. And Devyn was born and raised in Ohio, USA. She came to Estonia in 2017, right? If I'm correct,
Yes,
not
yeah.
wrong. She was 24 at that time, and she stayed here for almost 4 years, and she left when she was 28. And she says that living in Estonia was a very transformative experience for her, and it taught her to be how to be independent and strong, and helped her ease into the realities of adulthood. And it's great to be here because I can relate to that on so many levels. Great to have you here, Devyn.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Manan.
So I think before we go into the topic of how all the way you came to Estonia, let's talk a little bit about your background. You from the US,
hmm
growing up, what was your childhood like? Education, everything. If you can just give some idea to all
Yeah, of
our
course.
viewers.
So I grew up in a small village in Ohio called Lexington, less than 5,000 people, maybe bigger than an Estonian village.
Hmm.
I played sports my whole life. I went to the same school from kindergarten until 12th grade. Our village was pretty conservative. I didn't grow up very religious, but I grew up in a very conservative, predominantly white area. Like I said, I played sports, so that taught me a lot of life lessons. I was raised by my birth parents. So this is an interesting story. I was raised by my birth parents my whole life. Then I went off to college, to university, to a small private Christian school, actually. And I started going to a very conservative Christian church. Um, and then shortly after that, I graduated from my undergrad in 2015, and then I taught for 2 years at another village school in Ohio called Mount Gilead. And then I found myself getting ready to move to Estonia with my adopted parents. So kind of odd. I was adult adopted legally by the court system by the people who I ended up moving to Estonia with, actually. So I was 24 when that process happened. Um, and can I start how I moved to Estonia?
Um, if
Or
you're
is it
okay
too
with
early?
sharing, like how this
Yeah.
happened exactly for our readers, because it's not every day you come across people who
Yeah.
change their parents. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So, I was raised by my birth parents, very conservative. Um, my birth dad, unfortunately, was an alcoholic most of my life. And that really kind of created a division between my parents and myself. I have an older sister, she's 4 years older than me. But I'd say when I was around 13 or so, I started to really not identify much with my immediate family. I was very close with my grandparents, and some good family friends and stuff too. But as I continued to get older, I just felt more and more distance between my birth parents and myself. But the maid of honor, actually, at my birth parents' wedding, her name is Tina. She actually, a lot of people in Estonia know her. She's a copy editor, and she owns AEIOU, the editing company in Estonia. She and her husband, Mike. So she was the maid of honor at my birth parents' wedding, actually. So she was best friends with my birth mom. Um, we connected in 2007 on Facebook, and then I'd say around 2015, I started spending a lot of time with her and her husband, Mike. And when I met them, it was just like an instant connection, and I really felt super close with them. They understood me. We just became really close, and it felt like a family I had never really had before. So, after a couple of years of spending a lot of time together, um, it kind of started off as a bit of a joke, like, "Hey, how would you feel about being an only child?" And I was like, "Okay." And then it kind of became reality. And so we made the legal commitment actually to become a family. They don't have any other children. So in 2017, we went through the court system, and because I was older than 18, I didn't have to have my birth parents, sign off on it. And so I ended up changing my name actually from Devyn Collins to Devyn Allen Kolesser. In Estonia, I just went by Allen because it was easier. So that went through in 2014, actually, it's September 11th, 2017, is when that went through. So yeah, it's very odd. But I'm still in contact with my birth parents as well. And actually Mike and Tina are back here in Ohio, um, after living in Estonia too.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounded quite different and interesting, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, let's talk a little bit about you when you were coming to Estonia. So, what
Okay.
were you like when you were coming to Estonia, and what was the experience like of actually landing to Estonia,
Sure.
being in Estonia?
Yeah, so I was working at a small school, like I said, Mount Gilead, and Mike and Tina had mentioned, hey, we're moving to Estonia. Do you want to move with us? Mike was taking the FBI legal attaché position at the U.S. Embassy. So I ended up having to find my own job. So I had applied for several different schools. I had been contacted by a couple of the schools that they had part-time English teaching positions. I was really happy with my school in Mount Gilead, so it was a really big decision to just like pick up from Ohio. I had never lived anywhere else and just move, across the world. I I was pretty I wasn't a shy person, but I was definitely inexperienced in a lot of ways, because of my conservative upbringing and because of my church choices, especially at the time. Um, I I would say that I hadn't really experienced much in the world. I wasn't sheltered per se, but just like used to small town living, I guess. So we moved. I started the process. I ended up getting my job, I think, in April, with the international school. And the process of getting to Estonia was really difficult. I ended up having to go drive 8 hours to the Estonian embassy in Washington, D.C. Ended up having to go back, get through all the paperwork. Um, I was really nervous to move, I think. I didn't know anything about Estonia. I didn't even know where Estonia was when they first mentioned it to me. And then we arrived midsummer, like I think July 7th or 8th. So white nights. We were staying in an Airbnb for the first couple of weeks. No blackout curtains. I'm like wrapping a scarf around my head because I packed for summer also. It was like I don't know, upwards of 30 degrees where I was coming from, and coming to Estonia, it was a very cold summer that year. So I had like two outfits to wear. It was just a really big change for me. And it took a really long time for me to acclimate, but I had to start work on August 1st already. So I had 3 weeks to just like get myself together and figure out what I was going to do. Um, yeah, it was a really tough decision to move. But I knew I was moving with my parents. And so it felt, like I had a bit of, um, a safety net if something were to have happened.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of from a perspective of many other people, I think you were a lot luckier in this regard because, for example, you were moving with your parents and you
Hmm.
already had a job lined up that you were,
Yes.
that you would be supporting your,
Hmm.
you had it there already. So, uh, what was the first year like? What was your routine like when you came all the way? I know you mentioned that uh, white nights and everything, and then I'm sure soon the
Yeah.
winter would happen and you would experience. So 2000, that was like 2018, and then onwards. So
Yeah.
how was your first year or so like, or let's say the period of transition, or let's say where you were still not fully settled? So that
Sure.
period.
The first year was the hardest, absolutely. I had made a commitment to myself that I would stay for at least 2 years, because I knew the first year was going to be really hard. And it was pretty miserable, I'll have to admit. I was like, I'm going to learn Estonian. I'm going to sort this. I'm going to, really just dive into what's happening around me. And it was really difficult to even try to learn Estonian because I was working at an English-speaking international school, and we had a lot of local staff at the time, and they all wanted to practice their English, and those were the only people I was really interacting with. So it was hard for me to do anything with the language. Also, given that I had moved to help open International School of Talent, there were only four of us initially for the first month. It was nonstop work. We had documents, curriculums, policies to be writing. So I was working working with a new curriculum I had never worked with before as well. And so it was all really, really difficult. I didn't really feel like I had much energy outside of my work to be doing anything, to be meeting people, to be going around, to, be adventuring much around town. Um, I also found it really hard to meet people, even when I did, to make friends. Even the people from my school, I felt like I didn't really have a strong connection to the local staff when I first came. I felt really lonely. I had one good friend back home who, like, any point in the day I called, he'd answer, and I felt like I really needed that because I didn't really have many people other than being with my parents. It was a really tough transition. I will say though that the winters weren't as hard for me as they were for most people, and I think coming from Ohio had something to do with that. Ohio winters are also very long and dark and gray. So my first 3 winters actually in Estonia, I felt okay. It wasn't until my 4th winter there that I was like, "Okay, yeah, this is really impacting me." Um, but yeah, the transition was hard. I I mean, like you said, I had it a little easy in the sense that my parents were with me. I had a job lined up. Figuring out all the banking was tough. Being an American, I immediately got my temporary residence permit, so that was easy. I was able to get a phone, public transportation. I was able to sort out pretty quickly. But yeah, I'd say the first year was for sure my hardest year. I didn't feel so connected with my job. I felt like I was just working so much and didn't have much time outside of that. I did have the embassy, so we had some people from the embassy that we were connected with. But I had also shortly after becoming friends with them and then seeing some people leaving, I also made a commitment that I wasn't going to just stay secluded to the embassy community because they leave, and I anticipated staying much longer than most of those people. So I really, shortly after my first year, tried to branch out and find new people and connect with other people. About a year after being there, I started dating someone, and that really kind of opened up my social life and made me feel like I had more to do outside of my job. And it kind of like forced me into finding new routines other than just like waking up, going to work, coming home, you know, doing nothing at home and then going to sleep.
I will come back to the topic of dating after, but first I
Sure.
would like to ask you, uh, what were your first like moments of cultural shock? Like, do you
hmm
remember any to this day?
Yes. Yeah. I think the biggest one, my parents and I got into a taxi and we were laughing and having a good time. And the taxi driver turned around and looked at us and said, "If you keep smiling like that, people are going to think that you're mentally like ill, that you'll have problems." Also, I think most international expats that I've spoken to have also talked about even when you try to speak Estonian, they just don't understand you. Telling anybody where you live or trying to say something very basic. I remember, I've told this story many times, but I remember my first time trying to order a coffee and I said ooks instead of ix. And my friend who I was with just, had a big kick out of the fact that I said door coffee instead of one coffee. And that, moments like that were really hard for me. I also think coming from America, we have access to anything that we want. We have access to everything and almost too simply. I think that the consumer culture here is really toxic. And coming there were little things that I was like missing. For example, like peanut butter. to get any sort of American peanut butter from the store is like €8, and it's like a tiny jar, for half the price, we get a 3 times size that jar, and even making oh, yeah, the grocery stores too, that was really hard, just, like, reading any sort of ingredients in items at the grocery store, even trying to find what we were looking for, I remember that being something that was really difficult as well. The white nights, like I said, that was I still have photos of me with, like, a scarf wrapped around my eyes just trying to sleep the first and you have no concept of time, and the jet lag. That was
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. I can relate to like so much of that. Like I when I first came here, I often joked, like I made a lot of jokes,
Mhm.
and one of the jokes was that in Estonia, if somebody's smiling at you, then either something is wrong with you or something is wrong with them.
Yes.
So that's
Exactly,
like
yeah.
that's entirely true. Like if you are in a public space and you're laughing, like
Mhm.
enjoying and having a good time, you're an outlier.
Yes,
That's not how it
absolutely.
works.
Yes.
That's not how the society and everything works.
Yeah.
And people frown upon you and think of you as an outsider. And like
Yeah.
Americans generally overall have this. Like they're usually the loudest in the room.
Yes.
Foreigners usually,
I agree.
Americans in particular
Yes.
are the loudest in the room. So
I Yeah, sorry, one more thing that I just remembered was, directions and public transportation. My job is one stop away from the airport, and Tramline 4, when I first came, actually didn't go all the way out there yet, so I
yeah,
had to
yeah,
switch over
yeah,
to a bus, and people asking for directions or asking for help on the tram, I just remember my whole 4.5 years there, I remember, like, always having to be the one to, like, jump up and, like, help somebody when they're trying to get from the airport into the city center because everyone is just so like, everyone keeps to themselves, you know? You don't
yeah,
look at somebody's cute baby on the tram, you don't make, like, goo goo eyes, at the baby or try to pet somebody's dog, like, all no-nos.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think that the culture might have changed, but I've always like for me it was also very difficult in the beginning.
Mm,
Like the first 2 years, I would say that was the settling period for you, and similarly for me as well. That I was so wrapped in my studies and I had to. It was just the whole thing, and then there was this time of like bitterness and being
mhm.
angry. Like it's I nobody everyone is like racist and they don't like me. They don't like
Yeah.
foreigners, and I well there was like a growth and transition period where
Mhm. Realize
realize
that's
that
not true.
it's yeah that it's easier for me to change myself than to change like a
Sure,
million people as well, and
of
then
course.
that's when I became shamelessly myself.
Yeah.
So that I yeah so that I can relate to so much of that. So let's
Mhm.
circle back to after your first year ended and you started dating
Sure.
somebody. So how did
Mhm.
that happen?
Oh, well, we connected on Tinder, of course.
Hmm.
It was a funny process, actually. Like I said, I came from a very conservative place, and um, I'm outing myself a little bit. So I started dating a girl actually,
Hmm.
about a year into moving to Estonia. And it was very new for me, and it was new for her as well, actually. So I was just like scrolling through Tinder, and then all of a sudden, some random girls started showing up. And then I realized that my mom and some of her friends had changed my settings. And my mom, yeah, my mom was like, "So would you date like a girl?" And I was like, "I guess, we can look into that." It was a transition period for me in a lot of ways because when
Hmm.
moving to Estonia, like not just my sexuality, but also like I never drank before I came to Estonia because of my birth dad. So I found myself for the first time like getting drunk at the US Marine Corps ball, with the ambassador's wife. So it was a lot of changes for me. And this is why I said, and why in my bio I said I kind of grew up here. I don't think had I had I not moved to Estonia, I wouldn't be who I am today, and who I am today is the most authentic version of myself. I know Estonia kind of gets pegged for being quite conservative, but Estonia allowed me to, like, take myself out of my small town and kind of decide who I wanted to be when I moved, and I never imagined that that would be, like, a lesbian woman who, like, drinks alcohol, and that was really difficult for me, so when I started dating the girl that I, started dating in 2018, it was really new for me, so another, process of newness, and learning who I was and what I wanted to be and what I was willing to share with others. And this kind of I know a lot of us, a lot of foreigners in Estonia who I became friends with could identify with this as well. Um, I was a churchgoer before I came to Estonia, regular. I went multiple times a week to church, and I tried to find a church in Estonia that I could feel comfortable in, somewhere that I could go and be welcomed. And I think that was a really big culture shock for me as well. In America, you see someone new at church and everybody flocks to them. And I think sometimes that can be overwhelming. But I went to many churches in Estonia without being even greeted. And then I consistently went to one church for a couple of months, and I just still felt like such an outsider, even though I went with a friend. And I saw that even the people who that Estonian friend knew in that church, they weren't even talking to them when we went. And so I grappled a lot with my identity when moving to Estonia with my faith, with my sexuality, with who I wanted to be as a person. And I think that Estonia really gave me the chance to say, you know what? I don't have to be this person who I was in Ohio. I can be who I want to be. And then coming back to Ohio, I had to face those realities. Do I continue being this authentic version of myself? Or do I succumb back to this small town life, that, I never really wanted for myself?
Yeah. I myself come from a very conservative background. I mean,
Mhm.
not nowhere as strict as your uh, parents, but obviously in Pakistan we don't drink, and there is not free mingling of genders as well.
Sure.
So for me, like one of the motivations for leaving my own country was just this regression that I wanted to run away from my religion and my culture and my
Mhm.
family because I thought it was so restrictive and suffocative. But I think eventually, as I grew up, as I formed my own identity, and uh, I had discarded everything before,
Mhm.
like when I came here, like thrown everything out the window. And then slowly I started to realize as I formed my own identity, as I became myself,
Mhm.
that the religion, the family, the culture, and that they are there for a reason. Like I
Sure.
found the need for those things. I found the reasoning for why those things like exist. Like for example,
Sure.
you can talk about church and I can talk about going to the mosque. Like for example, in Islam you're required,
Mhm.
or you're sort of obligated, or you should go to a mosque 5 times a day, at least once a week.
Mhm.
And I think this idea of going to a congregation, doing something together with all the people, feels like an intrinsic need within humans. Not
Mhm.
like we are community people, and it has to fulfill some kind of a need within us. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this like transition of uh, finding yourself in a vacuum, coming from a conservative culture, and then obviously the part of you that was conservative. I mean, it took a long time. That's like you
Mhm.
nurtured that part and it grew up, and obviously that part was about to die, or
Mhm.
like falling off in Estonia. That can be very hard. It was very hard for
Mhm.
me as well. So do you remember anything, or do you want to share something about how it felt to be in a culture where you are doing the things that you were like forbidden not to do, like drinking
Mhm.
or dating,
Sure.
or things like that?
Yeah. I felt ashamed, I have to be
Hmm.
honest. Even though I felt like I could rewrite my narrative, when I started dating the girl, I was hesitant to even tell people who I didn't know. or people who I was just meeting or people from the embassy. I had grown up in this way that I was an example to all the people around me, and I had parents of kids telling me, "Oh, my child looks up to you. I trust my child with you," things like this. And then going to Estonia, I felt like I kind of had to like put a lock on my life so that people outside of my immediate circle and the people who knew what I was doing and who I was becoming or who I was, allowing myself to be, I guess. I was afraid of all of those other people and what all those other people might think. So even my conservative friends in Estonia, I mean, if they watch this, they're gonna know. Like, some of them don't even know now, right? But I came to terms with my sexuality and who I was eventually, but even then, I still didn't just go around telling everybody. I didn't just make myself public, even with drinking. I came home to visit for 3 weeks in 2019, and some of the people who I had an alcoholic beverage in front of were just losing their mind, like my birth mom, she was just so shocked. She's like, "You're drinking alcohol?" Like, at that time I was what, 25, 26. We can drink legally at 21, and it was just a big shock for everybody and for myself too. There were a lot of times where I didn't really want to admit who I was because I was afraid of that judgment that was going to come from those people. Um, and then I started dating the girl, and then a couple of years later, I met a very good friend who was very conservative, churchgoer, and we became really close, and this was something else that kind of like reeled me back in, and I felt guilty again. I felt like I needed to deny who I was. And I was really worried what they were going to think of me, and I started to try to deny those aspects of myself that I had finally allowed myself to be when I felt like I didn't have anybody around me to correct me or tell me what I was doing was wrong. Um, my parents, though, who were with me in Estonia, they left just days before the first COVID case hit, so they made it out just in time, unintentionally. But they were always very supportive. My mom has been a supporter of the LGBTQ community for probably 25 years now, 20, 25 years now. So she was really supportive. My dad was really supportive, not just with like who I was dating, but becoming who I wanted to be. I drank with them a lot, not like, when I was drinking with them. I'll put it that way. And it felt safe. It felt like I could do what I wanted to do and maybe sometimes overindulge. And I knew I was in a safe space because growing up, even when I was of age to drink here in the US, I didn't feel like it was safe and I felt like I was being judged. And I was afraid of what the alcohol was gonna, like, what effect the alcohol was gonna have on me because of my birth dad as well. So there were a lot of transitions, a lot of changes. And a lot of grappling with my own feelings of guilt and like being ashamed essentially. But I did meet a lot of really good friends who I still am in contact with today, in Estonia, who were like, you know what, screw this, like, be who you want to be, date who you want to date, drink when you want to drink. And those were the friends who I felt really connected to, who I know will be lifelong friends. And who, you know, at times almost didn't even understand why I was afraid or why I was ashamed, and they're just like, just be who you want to be. You don't, like, we're not judging you. Nobody's judging you. And the people who are judging you, like, they shouldn't be a part of your life if this is how you feel around them. Um, but yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of feeling afraid, even of my people back home. Some of my closest friends I didn't even tell until like a year and a half ago, that, hey, I'm dating girls now. And some of them were really happy for me, and others were not so happy because of their beliefs and, how they were raised, and um the way that they live their lives and their faith and things like that.
Yeah, I remember when I first went to the US, I was in Boston, and
Hmm.
there was this like concert happening. Boston is one of my favorite cities because
Oh yeah, I was
I
just there.
feel it's, yeah, yeah, it's sort of like it's I felt it's like the closest city I've ever been to that resembles Europe, because you have like
Oh,
small streets,
mhm,
these kind of houses. And I remember there was this concert happening there, and there was this girl who had this bracelet or something on,
mhm.
and it was related to alcohol. Like you could buy alcohol because you had proven or
Yeah.
shown your identity. And at the time, it was just laughable to me. Like I don't know, like she was 26 or something, and
Yeah.
it was laughable that, like, in how much of this thing is like ingrained, that the alcohol culture. And I think it's like uniform across all of the states, like
Mhm.
everywhere, even including
Yep.
Alaska, if I don't
Yeah, 21. We can't drink until
hmm
we're 21. Yeah. We
hmm
can serve in the military at 18, but we can't
yeah,
legally
yeah,
consume alcohol until
yeah,
21.
that's always very surprising.
Yeah.
So if you move on to your journey, like in Estonia,
Mhm.
what was there ever a tipping point in the middle, or maybe later, or in the early, where you finally started to feel comfortable in who you were and in the place you were? Because 4 years is, of course, not a short time. 4 years
Yeah.
is a lot of time. Do
Mhm.
you remember anything about that? Was there any particular incident, transition, meeting with someone that made you realize that, okay, I am myself now. I'm Devyn. I don't feel guilty about what I
Yeah.
want or who I am. And finally, the process of recognizing myself for who I am
Mhm.
has started. Yeah.
Um, I think it came and went. I don't think there was ever, ooh, sorry. I don't think there was ever a time where it was just like, this is exactly who I am, and I'm happy to be this person. I think that when I started dating the girl that I dated in 2018, I was worried, but we were so happy, right? Like it was new relationship energy. We moved in, eventually we moved in together. And I think when we moved in together, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to be independent. Like we're going to make this work. I'm not going to be ashamed. Everything's going to be great. Um, for the first, we dated for almost 2 years. I'd say I felt very comfortable in that relationship when I was talking with the people around me who knew who I was.
Mhm.
I don't know that while I was in Estonia, I really ever reconciled fully with my identity, until, unfortunately, I came back in 2021, for my sister's wedding. And while I was here, I was like, you know what? All the people in my life who don't know who I am, like it was actually my return back home is when I was like, you know what? Because I was more afraid of the people here, not the people in Estonia. There were some people in Estonia who I was worried to tell who I was and for them to see like the real me, essentially. But I think it wasn't until I came back here after 4 years being in Estonia that I was like, you know what? If these people here don't love me for who I am, then I don't want them in my life, you know. And this is what I'm gonna do, and this is who I'm gonna be. And I ended up like telling my grandma that I was gay, and that was a big thing. My grandma was very conservative. She was very sweet actually, and I think when finally, like, when my grandma accepted who I was and was, like, excited and happy for me, I was just like, "I don't care about anyone else," you know? My conservative 80-year-old grandma is, like, happy for me and just wants me to be who I am, and if she can accept that at 80 and living the life she's lived growing up in the small town that she's grown up in, I don't really care what anybody else has to say. I ended up still coming back to Estonia after that because I didn't leave Estonia until the end of October of 2021. Um, so when I came back to Estonia, then is when I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be who I am. And honestly, I regret not being able to do that earlier. And I think a big part of that was the church aspect. We have a really wide array of churches in the US. We have very conservative churches, we have in the middle of the road churches, and we have very liberal churches. And you don't find that in Estonia. You don't find
Yeah.
the liberal church. And I think that that was something that really I really struggled with because I wanted to continue my faith. I wanted to continue that community, that church life, and I still identify with that, and even then, I still identified with that, and it was something I was craving, really. I was really desiring that community and that group of people, but I knew deep down that I wasn't who they wanted. And, I had told my friend once I was, she's a very committed church member, at an Estonian church. She's Estonian. I said to her, I was like, you could have somebody with like a needle sticking out of their arm at the door of the church, and you guys flock to them, and you're so excited, and you want to turn them around, and you want to teach them about Jesus, but I'm here. Like, you don't have to convince me. I'm already convinced, I already believe this, and you guys still can't retain me. Like, you guys still can't keep me, and I ended up having a Brazilian flatmate in Estonia, and he kind of grew up very similar to how I grew up, and he had the same story. He felt the exact same way I did. He was like, Devyn, I grew up very conservative too, and I love my life, but I would love to find a good church. I would love to find a good group of people here who believe what I believe and who I can hang out with and not feel like I'm still the outsider. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me when I finally found that one Christian friend. I diverted back to who I was before even moving to Estonia, because I felt like so understood in one aspect of my life in Estonia that I had never really felt understood in. But in a way that was like almost a little toxic for me, because I started to deny all these aspects of myself who I had decided I was going to be, kind of like you said, like shame, like without shame.
Um, uh, let's talk a little bit about your work,
Mhm,
particularly about, as I understand, you were teaching or
mm,
you were just
mhm.
administration.
Both actually. I initially started off teaching, and then by the time I was finished, I was purely administrative.
So let's talk a little bit about the teaching experience. So
Mhm,
what was it like? Who were you teaching? Were there subjects? What was the demographics like
mhm.
for the kids and all that? Yeah.
Sure. So, when I first moved, we initially were supposed to open grades 1 to 4. And then we decided actually to open up grades 1 to 6. So for the first 2, 3 months at the international school, I was teaching grades 4, 5, and 6, all core subjects.
Hmm.
I had only, I think, 13 kids in my class, or about 13. They were all different nationalities. Like, I think every single one of them. I don't think I had one kid. I had Turkish kids. I had a girl from South Korea. Um, I had a Russian kid, a Ukrainian kid, like, the whole spectrum. Um, it was really hard. At the beginning, it was really difficult. I am certified to teach English and history, and I was teaching also math and science to 3 different grade levels. Eventually, I'd say around maybe October, we ended up splitting, and so then I was only teaching fifth and sixth grade. Our whole school only had about 20, 21 kids in it, and I had almost half of them in my class. Um, the curriculum was different, a curriculum I had never, taught before. We were trying to weave the Estonian curriculum into the framework of the International Baccalaureate. So it was all really hard for me. It was all new. We were creating everything. Um, my second year, we moved locations. We started out in the Estonian Entrepreneurship University of Applied Sciences. So we just occupied a couple rooms in there. So it was really hard to kind of acclimate even then, because we didn't have our own independent areas. Um, then the European school moved to the old train station, and then we moved into the European school's building. So we then occupied the third floor, and things became a lot more fluid, I guess, as a school for us. I took over the middle years program coordinating my second year, and we were just kind of like we hit the ground running. So for my first year, we started with 20 kids, grades 1 to 6, and by the time I left, we had kindergarten all the way through grade 12, and we had probably maybe 120 kids by the time after those 4 years. Um, It was hard. The International Baccalaureate was a different system, a different approach to education that I had never participated in before. So that was a learning curve, a learning experience. But I really enjoyed that actually. I enjoyed the flexibility of the International Baccalaureate, so that was really good. Um, we were kind of battling all the differences between the IB system and the Estonian curriculum and trying to find a way to appease both groups, both authorization teams essentially. So that was always a challenge. But then by the time my fourth year came, I was no longer teaching and I was the manager of staff and students, purely administrative, like dealing with operations pretty much.
Mhm. Um, okay, so by this time, let's say you are not just working as well, that you have a social life as well, because you have
Yeah, of course.
like a partner. Was your partner Estonian
hmm
or international? Okay,
Yeah, she
Estonian.
was Estonian. She worked at Transfer, well, now Wise.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I know that Wise is like a whole little city in itself because it's so
hmm
international and all that. What was your social life at that time, and particularly as you mentioned that you were very introverted and shy when you came here, how was it transitioning to having a social life
Mhm.
if you had any?
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say introverted and shy. I think I was just conservative as a
Hmm.
person, so that was tough. I've always been like I've made friends pretty easily throughout my life. So I think coming to Estonia was hard for me for that reason exactly because it was difficult to make friends. You know, we joke, but you meet an American abroad and they like their whole life story in 15 minutes and that's what we're used to, right? And it took me a long time to find people who trusted me to share those very like intricate moments of their lives. I ended up so we had, of course, an international staff, but some of our staff has lived in Estonia for many years, even if they are foreigners to Estonia. My social circle ended up being a lot of our staff members who stayed with us for a couple of years. Um, Two of my closest friends, they're a married couple. He's French and she's from Latvia. I'd say that's who I spent most of my time with. Um, and I ended up spending a lot of time with their friends as well. Board game nights, going out and drinking, watching movies, things like that. But by the time I left, there wasn't really a night that I could get away without having something to do. um, so I started my first year feeling very lonely and having to do a lot of things independently. Um, but my time at the school really helped me develop some relationships with people who I was working with that, became really good lifelong friends for me.
Hmm. Um, what advice would you give to people who are struggling with making friends in Estonia from your own
Mm,
experiences?
Um, I think you just kind of have to put yourself out there. I know that's hard. I know that's like an easy cop out thing to say. I know that Kat is doing all these international events. I went to
Hmm.
many of them. I went to many of them, one, to support her, but I also met a lot of really cool friends there. And I think that that's a really good way to start. I think it's hard to find Estonian friends, but even if you can't find Estonian friends, there are international people there, expats who live there who are going to be there for a long time or who have been there for a long time. And I think that's who I ended up becoming closer friends with, were the foreign people living there, but who were like, you know what, I love Estonia and I'm going to like create some roots here. And it does just take time. People aren't gonna just jump on your bandwagon to be your friend just because you're lonely. You have to put yourself out there, you have to make the effort, and just because somebody says no, like, a couple of times, like, with meeting up, doesn't mean that they're not interested. Like, people have their own lives, they're busy, everybody has things going on, and I think that that's really important to keep in mind. Um, like you said, it's easier to change yourself than it is to change like an entire country of people. And I think that that's also something to keep in mind when going somewhere. Like we have to acclimate to what's going on around us. And it was hard for me because like you said, Americans are very loud. We're very upfront in your face. And I kind of forced myself to make sure that I was making friends outside of any sort of American community. I ended up becoming really close friends with a lot of Turkish people there as well. They might not be as American as as like true-blooded Americans, but they're also like that culture of people is also very um they gather a lot. They're very friendly. They're very giving people. Like my Turkish group of friends, I was hanging out with just as much as like as anyone else. But I think just like putting yourself out there, making sure that you're making the effort, contacting people, showing up to events, like being committed to things. I also went to almost all of the Astonishing Evening events that were going on when I was there. I loved those. I thought it was really great. You find people who are like-minded to you there. Just making sure that you're putting yourself in places with people who are like you. If you're a very outgoing person and you're like going to the library. That's not you're not gonna find your kind of people there. If you're a drinker, go to the bar. If you're like interested in hiking events, there are like meetup hiking events there. If you're interested in board game nights, go to the board game nights. You'll find the people that you're looking for. They're there for
Um,
sure.
yeah, yeah, it's. I think one of the starting things that I always tell other people, myself as well, that um, whether it is dating or just socializing or making friends, start with the
Mhm.
expats because they're the
Yeah.
same there. Don't start with locals
Yeah.
or anything because
Yeah.
you can't start a game at like hard mode right away.
Yeah.
So you have to start at like the easy mode.
Yeah.
And from there, I think you can warm yourself up, build some social skills because
Mhm.
no matter who you are, you need like let's say black belt social skills in Estonia if you want to
Yes.
succeed.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
Mhm.
I want to circle back to one thing and sort of get like an overview of how has your thinking about religion changed
Mhm.
for your own self,
Sure.
starting from the time before you came to Estonia, since you've been to Estonia, and to now. What do you think of it now? And both positive and negative aspects that you think that you have come to realize over time.
Sure. So, to give you some context of my pre Estonia life, I was going to an apostolic Pentecostal church. So, for people who don't know what that means, it's one of the most conservative Christian denominations. So, we didn't cut our hair. We wore skirts and dresses to our knees. No piercings, no tattoos, no drinking. Many of the pastors don't even watch TV. It's very, very conservative. I went to an apostolic Pentecostal church by choice. I wasn't forced into it. My family didn't go there. I went because I found a group of people who I identified with, and I also agreed with a lot of the doctrine. Um, I went to that church here in the US for I think probably 5 or 6 years. And then shortly before moving to Estonia, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a step away from this. I was in leadership. I was like, you know what? I'm moving. I'm going to take a little step away and see like how I feel about that. There is an apostolic Pentecostal church in Estonia, actually, and I had been in contact with some of them, and they're great people. The pastors of that church are absolutely amazing. I felt a bit bad because I think I a little let them down. I had told them I was going to be moving, and then because I had decided to take a step back from the church before coming to Estonia, I didn't actually attend their church, but they had kind of been eagerly anticipating my arrival, we'll say. Um, so I came to Estonia and I really wanted to find a church that I felt like I could fit in that maybe wasn't so conservative because I still believe in God, I still identify as a Christian. And I realized very quickly that the church community in Estonia was really small. And everybody knew everybody, and it was pretty exclusive. And I tried. My mom even went with me to church a couple of times. I tried. My partner at the time when I was living there, she was also very willing to go with me, even though, she wasn't religious at all, because she knew it was important to me. And I probably went to 4 or 5 different churches there and never really felt like I fit in anywhere. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna put a pause on this because it's just making me more sad, actually. And the English speaking churches that are there. So I even went to non English speaking churches and had people translate for me. And then, but the English speaking churches I felt were either like more focused on socializing, or they were focused on bringing people in a way that felt too like Sunday school for me, like very baby church almost. And so I felt like my needs in the church realm weren't really being met. Then I came back to the States, and I will admit I haven't actually been going to church since I've come back. But my reflection back, and I've actually talked to a lot of people about this since returning, I was really discouraged by the church scene in Estonia, and I felt really like it was such an exclusive aspect that they really needed to work on their evangelizing and their bringing people in. And in Christianity, that's like one of the main tenets. Essentially, it's like one of the main things. Like, you spread the gospel and you bring people to church, and you try to not convert people, but you try to show them like who we believe Jesus is, right? And I felt like they were doing a really poor job at that, and it was very frustrating for me. But I will say that after coming back here, I mean, we can all acknowledge that Christians in America are not doing it right either, right? I don't identify with the American Christian. And I think this is really hard too, because I want to have this aspect of my life. I believe in God. I would love to find this very liberal church and these people I identify with, but I can't get behind a lot of the things that American Christians are behind, like anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage. Many Christians are pro-gun, and I just don't identify with these things. Um, but I have told a lot of people, even in the US, that if I had to say one good thing about Christians in Estonia, is that they are like the authentic version of a Christian. When you think of like who we would want Christians to be, maybe are they a little judgmental? Yes. I think people of faith, a lot of them are judgmental, just unintentionally. But I think that they are truly living out their faith. I think that they, like, you're not going to find, um, little side story. I was walking with a girl once, and I don't know if you remember or saw on Instagram, there was one day that we had Blackout Tuesday, and it was to support the Black Lives Matter movement in the US.
Hmm.
And she started talking to me about it. She's Estonian, and she was like, I like um disabled my Instagram because I was getting really frustrated with this Blackout Tuesday thing. And I tried to explain to her for hours, Manon. I was trying to explain to her to the point where I started to cry. And that sounds so extreme, but people in Estonia, I think, don't understand how Christians in Estonia don't understand what Christianity is like in America and how starkly different these two are. And I say that story to tell you that I was trying to explain to her how what people in the world, what people in the US view Christians like in America. They are racist. They are against any other faith. They are not loving like they should be. Like I said, they're anti abortion, they're anti gay marriage. They want to force their views on other people, to a point where there is no separation between church and state in the US. And it even like you can look at somebody and know that they're a Christian here and almost immediately identify them with all these things socially that we don't accept. But she wasn't understanding because she couldn't connect how inherently in the US Christians are all these things that like Jesus would not have wanted for Christians, right? So she couldn't understand how Christians could be racist and how Christians could be phobic of other religions, or how Christians could be anti anybody, because Jesus commanded us to love one another, right? And it was just so disheartening for me to not be able to like fully explain to her how like how this is viewed here and how Christians don't have this like great perception in America, at least for people who are very liberal. I might not be able to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't care if you do them. If you're not impacting me, then like you do you, right? Um, but yeah, I think that Christians in Estonia are genuinely like living out their truth, and living out like you're not finding a lot of hypocritical Christians, we'll put it that way. Like you're not finding people who are getting drunk on Saturday coming to church on Sunday. You're not finding people who are racist or who are homophobic. They might disagree with you being LGBTQ, but they are going to still love you despite that, right? And that's I think that is like so beautiful about that because in America for a long time, most of my childhood, being a Christian was the cool thing, right? Like if you were a Christian, it was something that was like deemed good, deemed acceptable, deemed what is like the norm. But being a Christian in Estonia is not the cool thing to do, right? They're the outsiders, they're the outcasts. And I think that like their bravery to be able to continue that and say, you know what, I don't care what the rest of this country thinks or what the rest of humanity thinks of us. Like this is what we believe and we're going to live it out. And I think that there's something like really beautiful in that.
Um, what I would like to ask you more is the non scripture aspect of what religion means to you. Like,
Mhm.
aside from going to the church on Sundays or anytime, aside from,
Sure.
I don't know, reading Bible or these things, how do you feel religion fills something within you? Whoa,
Sure.
like, because you have been to both sides. Like, you've been in Ohio, very
Mhm.
conservative. Religion is like in the air around you, and you have
Mhm.
been here where religion is nowhere at all, like
Mhm.
non-existent, like it's a complete
Yeah.
vacuum, and it's in the air as well. And I'm sure there must be times when you were completely devoid of any like contact with religion at all, like
Mhm.
not just
Mhm.
Christianity but any religion.
Yep.
So I want to know, like, why are you like the thing is, why are you still a Christian if you saw
Yeah.
the other side? What made you come back and then this thing?
Sure. Um I think that inherently, we all want to be good, right? We all want to do good things. We all want to be good people, even if sometimes we slip up or we've taken a bad path in life. I think for me, my faith has kind of kept me on this like straight and narrow in a sense of like, I can choose to be a good person, like with or without a faith, right? And there are many people in the world who do this, who choose to live their lives in a good way, doing good things, like doing good deeds, being kind, being good people, without having some sort of like faith connection. I think for me, um, this is something that has like always been like and I didn't grow up religious, so I like wanna keep that in mind. Like I grew up very conservative, but we weren't religious. We didn't go to church when
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high school is when I decided, you know what, like this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a Christian. I want to like give myself to God. And this is what kept me on this straight and narrow, even at times where like my peers were out partying and sleeping around and doing all these things. I was trying to like be a good example to those around me. And I think that's where when I moved to Estonia and I came out and I started drinking, I felt like I was somehow like going back on that commitment. Um, I have seen both sides, you're right. Like I see the people here. I don't agree with American Christianity, but I also like I remember feeling so empty in Estonia because I was lacking this connection and not like I can have my own personal connection with God, right? Like many people like God is not a church building. God is not, the community of people that you're with, but I remember hearing something once on the radio here that like, yeah, God can be the head, but what is God without the rest of his body? And we are the body of Christ, right? As people. And we are supposed to be like spending time with like-minded people and enjoying the company and like sharing our faith with people, even people who already believe. And I think what was so difficult about being in Estonia was I felt like I didn't even have it as an option. Like I felt like I was yearning for it so much, and I was like reaching for it, and I was trying so hard to find people who would accept me for who I was, even if who I was wasn't their like by the book Christian, you know. Um I think sometimes it is hard to have faith in God for anybody, right? Whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're like Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. I think there are times where like bad things happen, or life doesn't go as we had planned, and we get frustrated, or things just look differently. I think having that like faith in God is something that we can always rely on, even if somebody doesn't believe it's not real, right? There's something inherently like comfortable about believing in this higher power, whether or not others believe in it or not. Like, I'm not ashamed to tell people I'm a Christian, even when they're like, "Oh, you're gay, though." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gay, but just because I'm gay doesn't mean like God's gonna love me less." And even that was hard for me, like coming to terms with like my sexuality and my faith. But I have a hard time believing that there's a God out there who would spite me for who I love, you know? And I think like working through all of these things is what has kind of brought me a sense of comfort that like God has kept me from a lot of things in life. And, I've endured a lot of hardships too. But I think when it comes like back to it all, in any faith, like the main thing is like God is love, God is, and He wants us to love others too, no matter what religion you're really looking at. And I think that there's just something very comforting in that.
Um, let's I'll start to wrap it up.
Mhm.
Just a few things I have in mind.
Sure.
So, what now for you? Like, what are you doing currently? What are your plans for the future?
Um, so I just graduated with my master's degree 2 days ago, in global perspectives in education from Boston College, actually. So I was just in Boston. I am currently not working, but this summer in July, my current partner and I are going to be moving to San Antonio for her job. So I'm looking for whatever's there. We'll only be there for 2 years, so short time. I would like to move abroad again. This is something that, like, I don't really love it here. America is not the place to be, in my opinion. I came back here due to my differences with my employer when I was in Estonia. So I never really imagined coming back here. I truly thought I was going to be in Estonia for a lot longer than I was. And so coming back here was really difficult for me. Re-entry, like the culture shock of moving back to the US after 4.5 years was also really hard. So I don't intend on staying in the US forever. I prefer the international life, the European lifestyle. I identify more with that mindset as well. So I'm just kind of taking it one day at a time. I'm not sure what my future job looks like. I don't think I want to go back into the public education system in the U.S. So we'll see if maybe sort of educational consulting or something. But yeah,
Um, if you had an open choice, which country would you prefer to move to?
ooh,
Open choice.
that's really tricky. In Europe or just anywhere?
Let's focus anywhere.
Oh gosh. Um, hmm. That's really tricky. I honestly have never really thought of that. As a teacher, I think living somewhere in Asia would be a very interesting experience for education. So that's kind of been on my radar. Europe wise, man, I'm not really sure. We were just in Spain and in Rome. I think Italy would be amazing, beautiful. I don't know much about their education system there, though. I would definitely want to be somewhere that is like very open and liberal and, freedom of speech, like not having to worry about um, the troubles that we have here in the US, I guess. Yeah, I'd say Vietnam. We'll go there. I've Vietnam has
Good
been on the
choice.
t yeah, has been on the top of my list for a while. So we'll say that for job purposes and
Mhm.
nature purposes.
Would you ever consider moving to Estonia, or what would have to be the circumstances that would make you live in Estonia?
To move back,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would. I think finding a good job would be very important. We all know salaries in Estonia are very low, so for teachers, it's almost
Yeah,
laughable. And
yeah.
I think that they lose a lot of really good teachers because of that. Honestly, I don't think it wouldn't take much, to bring me back. I think looking while I was there, there were things that I felt really discouraged by, like the church aspect, for example. But since being here, I reflect on that time much more positively than I felt about it in the moment often while I was there. So I don't think it would take much to get me to come back to Estonia. I'd say probably a good job would be the starting point. I still have great friends there. Some of my friends have had babies. I need to see their babies, things like that. But it's a great country, great benefits. I mean, free you can't beat free public transportation, national health care, friendly people, good vibes, all the coffee shops everywhere. So not much. It wouldn't.
Hmm. Um, so if we were to like sort of summarize you, uh, in a way that how has Estonia changed you? How would you summarize that? Uh, who would you be if you didn't have this experience versus now with this experience?
Yeah, I wouldn't be myself at all. I'd be probably still working at Mount Gilead in the village school. I loved my job. I loved the people I was working with, but I was a version of myself who I don't identify at all as now. I Yeah, Estonia shaped me to understand that one, it's not so hard to move abroad. It might be challenging. Being with people is so important for me, especially. Like I'm a big people person, and I think that's the hardest thing. Like if I had to move abroad somewhere by myself, it would be much more challenging than if you're moving with someone, right? Um, but Estonia taught me, and I've told a lot of people, like, just do it, just like find the job and do it. I don't think I'd move somewhere without having a job secured first because that's always very risky.
Yeah,
And a lot of places you can't anyways. So
yeah.
um, I think that Estonia taught me that moving abroad, m- being in a place that's new or a culture that you don't understand is not so difficult as long as you have a good support system, even if they're not there, even if they're back in your home country. Estonia taught me that it's okay to be yourself. And I think that that's probably the most important thing. It was a really challenging 4 years for me, but I came out of it feeling like a more authentic version of Devyn than I ever felt going in. Um, and despite Estonia being quite conservative as a country, I felt like I could be myself more than I could even with like my most liberal people here because I had a pegged identity here. Moving there, I could rewrite who I wanted um, to be more authentic, to be more myself. So I don't think at all I'd be who I am now if it weren't for my time in Estonia. And like I said, Estonia like truly helped me grow up. Like I had to become independent. I had to find my way. I had to like sort myself out sometimes in a language that like people were understanding. Um, I had to be forgiving for myself and forgiving of others too, in the sense that like it's not always going to work out as you had planned. It's not always things aren't going to always look like by this book that you set for yourself. Things come up, bad things happen, good things happen, life changes. We shift who we are, and I think that there's a lot of beauty in that. And yeah, I think Estonia taught me that it's okay to be who I am. And I think that's probably like the purest thing that I could have taken out of my 4.5 years there.
It was really great having you, Devin. Is there anything that you would like to uh, give a shout out to? Maybe if you want your LinkedIn profile, if you're looking for a job, I can put it here. Or yeah, so I don't know
Yeah,
if
sure.
somebody
I
wants
can.
to.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send you my LinkedIn profile. I don't even remember what it's under. I think it's probably under Devin Allen Kolesser. But yeah, absolutely. I definitely have 2 years in San Antonio to go before I could even consider making my way back to Estonia, but I'll definitely be back soon. I have babies I have to kiss, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. All right, Devin, it was really nice talking to you. I think I got a very new perspective on life in Estonia. I think probably, I don't know many people who have this experience of about, I mean, at all this kind of experience coming from such a developed country like the US as a conservative
Mm,
Christian, and then finding yourself here as a conservative Christian while going through the challenges. I think it was, as I said before, like coming to Estonia on a bit of a hard mode as well.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so
Um,
much.
if I don't know if I'll be visiting the US probably this year, but let's see if I'm somewhere nearby. Then I would really like to
Yeah, absolutely.
meet you in person as well.
Yes,
So
please. I'd be happy. Yeah. Thank you so much,
um,
Manan.
yeah, no problem. But thank you everybody for watching. It's great having you. And if you have any questions or comments or ideas or thoughts about Devin or me, then please just write in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.
Perfect.
Bye
Thanks
bye.
so much. Bye.